It was a bolt from the blue or a shot across the bow or both. Premier Doug Ford, in his first legislative session, shocked residents of the capital city with a bill that cut their city council almost in half overnight. It prompted some to call for the city to secede from the province. And now the whole thing is before the courts. Here to consider what it means for the relationship between the two governments, we welcome Mary Margaret McMahon, Toronto City Councillor; Sevon Pelvetsian, CEO at the civic engagement organization Civic Action; John Matheson, Principal at Strategy Corp, who was the Chief of Staff to the Ontario Minister of Municipal Affairs during the amalgamation of Toronto 2 decades ago; and Michael Taube, former Stephen Harper speechwriter, now a columnist for Troy Media and the Washington Times. And we are delighted to welcome all of you back to our program, for 3 of you, and for the first time. Councillor, nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Let me just ask our director to bring this graphic up to go through some of the, depending on where you sit, the highlights or lowlights of what we're about to talk about. For example, the Better Local Government Act was passed by the Ontario Legislature on the 14th of August of this year, received royal assent on the same day. It reduces the number of wards in the upcoming October 22nd Toronto municipal election from the planned 47 to 25. The Ford government says this will save taxpayers $25.5 million over 4 years. And you know, of course, that Toronto has filed a court challenge, arguing the legislation violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms by being, quote, discriminatory and arbitrary. And the judge in the case says that he will rule soon, probably in the next week. Let's get everybody on the record on this first subject, and it makes sense, I guess, to start with you. Is this a good idea?
Definitely not. And it's not because residents of Toronto will not receive the level of service that they're receiving now from their city councillor. The workload will be unmanageable, untenable. The level of government that matters most to residents of Toronto is the municipal level. You turn on the tap in the morning, clean, safe water comes out. You drive or bike down your roads that have been paved. You put your garbage out, it is picked up. And that matters most. And that will not go away by...
Well, I was going to ask, we got to be careful here, because you're not saying the water is going to be dirty and undrinkable if it's 25 members on council.
But that work will not go away by cutting the councillors in half. And I'm actually quite shocked that this would come from Doug Ford, since the Fords have always prided themselves in customer service, in getting out there, answering every call, meeting people on the street,
and
getting the potholes
customer
filled.
service is going to be harder as a result.
Absolutely.
Okay, Michael Taube, your view on this.
Well, no surprise, obviously, I favor it. And it's because Premier Ford, much like most Conservatives in Ontario and in Canada, believe in efficiency and government efficiency. We believe that reducing the number of councillors from 47 to 25 can work, is tangible, and actually will create a more efficient, or shall we say, a leaner, meaner, and more effective type of city government.
At the risk of being facetious here, why don't we really be super efficient and just reduce it to 2 seats?
That'd be fantastic. But at the same time, I don't necessarily believe in that. And I don't think most would either. I just think that basically what happened was it's been growing. And the recent switch from 44 to 47 councillors, as proposed for this municipal election, was for a lot of people the last straw. I think that many have said that it has been climbing too fast and too quickly. Ergo, the question really remains, why can the City Council, or why cannot Toronto City Hall, operate the same way as the same number of federal seats in Toronto and the same way provincial seats in Toronto? Recognizing the fact that obviously municipal government deals with issues such as potholes, bridges, and other things that mostly federal and provincial MPs and MPPs do not wish to get involved in.
We will leave that question in the ether for now, but that's a great question. We'll come back to it. John, your view on the size of the council, 47 or 25 or something else?
Well, you know, it may not surprise you to know that when the amalgamation was first considered 20 years ago, the range of seats that was considered was from, I think it was 22 to 57. And that was because there were different models. One was to go to the federal wards. So in other words, the same idea that was implemented this time was on the books then.
You guys didn't do that, though.
Sorry?
You went for the higher number, didn't
you?
you?
And I'll tell you why in a second. But the other range was to take the old metro wards, and I think there were 28, and it was to double them, have 2 per ward. And so I think reasonable people have been able to agree that the range was somewhere in there, really, as long as the City of Toronto has been amalgamated. The reason we didn't go with the smaller number was because at the time, we'd already expended an awful lot of political capital just getting the amalgamation going, and we were being accused of wanting to destroy local democracy. And so because the Premier Harris didn't particularly have a strong view, he was prepared to be a little bit flexible on that point.
Thus you left the higher number.
And so we went with the higher number.
But you're okay with the lower number now.
Well, you know what? I think as David Crombie has said, the issue really isn't the number, it's what you do with the council once you're there. But I do want to be very respectful of the point that Councillor McMahon was making. I don't think that we have a problem of underutilized councillors with too much time on their hands. I mean, I think you could argue that the big winner in this process is going to be political staff, because you're going to wind up having to have more staff to support councillors. And that's either a good thing or a bad thing. In a lot of cases, I think these systems are a little bit like a drum kit. It is not the drum kit that makes for good drumming, it's how good the drummer is, right?
Fair enough. All right, let's get to Sevon. What is Civic Action's view on this?
Well, what's great is around this table, we're having a debate about the merits of the cut. That debate didn't happen. We woke up to the news that council was being slashed from 47 down to 25. And the very principle around democracy is around how we are governed. And that process wasn't part of what the decision was. We went right to ordained outcome. And a lot of folks, including Civic Action, had a strong reaction to that. And so it may be that there are merits to that cut. Absolutely, we're going to see services change. Residents are going to have to be fighting for in a doubling of what you're going to need to get those councillors' attention. But the efficiency argument hasn't necessarily stood the test of time. It has cost Ontario more when we amalgamated all these cities back decades ago. And we know that the cost of workers increases and the size of the workers increases as well. So was this a smart move for democracy? It was not. And was this a game of the province playing DJ in a game of musical chairs? Absolutely. The City of Toronto deserves better than that, and the residents deserve better than that.
Michael, I will confess to being small-minded on this, because consistency is, what is the expression? Like the hobgoblin of small minds, something like that. Explain to me why the new provincial government needs to consult tens of thousands of parents to change the sex ed curriculum, but it needs to consult absolutely nobody to change local democracy in Toronto.
That's quite the segue.
No.
But look,
it seems a reasonable question.
Look, I'm not a spokesperson for the government, but I think it depends upon the issue, quite simply. When you have an issue like sex ed, which obviously affects a wider range of people, and obviously there are going to be more views, pertinent and not pertinent, that are involved in the debate, I think you actually have to open something like that up to discussion to find out what parents truly believe in. The provincial government believes that the previous government, the previous Liberal government, kept it very narrow and tried to focus these groups, so to speak, with people.
The issue is consultation.
The issue is consultation, yes.
There is going to be tons for sex ed. There was none for this. Does that not matter?
Well, yes, I understand what you're saying. And look, I certainly agree when they've lowered the number of seats from 47 to 25, there was no consultation. At the same time, we have to be fair about things. While people keep claiming that Mr. Ford has an agenda because of his previous 4-year term as a city councillor and his late brother being mayor for a term and all the struggles they had, I think we have to be realistic about, one, the provincial election was held late. So no matter what he had proposed, it would have obviously been closer to the cutoff point than anything else. And number two, as I said before, not to be a broken record, because this government believes in limited government and more government efficiency, it actually makes sense that they would do it. Whether that was really part of their mandate when they initially came in, I don't know. You would have to ask them directly.
It wasn't.
Was it?
No.
No,
Wasn't
meaning
on the platform.
meaning that were they thinking about it for their first few weeks, few months? I don't know.
Had there been consultation and had there been a process that said, okay, we're going to take everybody's views into account here, but at the end of the day, we are going to get to 25. You can tell us how you want to get there, but that's where the goalposts are going to be. Would you have been okay with that?
I would have been better about that, but I don't believe 25 is the answer, and I feel, with all due respect, that councillors do more day-to-day work than MPs and MPPs. And it's never ending. It's 12 to 15-hour days and weekends as well, so you cannot compare fairly to the workload of an MP and MPP. But that consultation did not happen. This idea got pulled out of a hat midstream in an election without consultation, as we said. It was not on the Premier's platform, and if it is such a great idea, why not for the rest of the municipalities in Ontario?
John, you want to answer that question?
Well, I couldn't comment on why not for the rest of the municipalities. Toronto's always been a bit of a special case, but really what you're getting at here is there's two very different purposes that councillors fulfill. And one is the community engagement function, the representational function, the point of access. And I think we are all very fond of saying that local government is the closest to the people. And we designed our local government, going all the way back to the Baldwin Act in the 19th century, not so much to be a thing that was effective, but rather a thing that was inclusive. Because if you want effective, then you do what we do in a legislature. We elect a majority government, you give them the keys to run things for 4 years, they make decisions, and then we deal with it at the ballot box. Councils were deliberately set up in a different way. They were designed to give everybody a seat at the table. There was no particular sense that anybody would agree on anything before they get elected, and you kind of work things out in a collective way. And the interesting thing is that made sense because for many of the first decades of municipal government in Ontario, mostly the province called the shots and the municipality implemented them locally. And so having local say into local implementation of provincial policy made sense. As municipalities are becoming bigger, more empowered, more complex, more like policy-making entities, the decision-making function of council gets thrown into high relief. And then people start to say, well, these guys, they can't make a decision as elegantly as the province can. And of course, anybody who's worked at both levels understands that it's been built that way. You're complaining about the fact that one thing that was designed to be inclusive is functioning differently from a thing that was designed to be effective.
Let me do one more question on this before we move on. And Sema, let me try this with you. If I remember and understand the numbers, you represent how many constituents right now?
Close to 60,000.
60,000. Under the new boundaries, it'll be more like 120,000. What should constituents expect of their politicians if they are in fact trying to cater to the needs of 120,000 people instead of 60,000 people?
Well, it's going to be rough. I mean, I don't know anybody who expects less customer service from government these days, right? The needs are going up, the complexities are going up. And so we're going to feel that. We're absolutely going to feel that. And the argument around why this decision was made, cost savings, efficiencies, what have you, I don't think folks are going to feel that either. So it's not like they're going to have a pocketbook benefit to a council cut decision. So we're going to feel it on both sides.
What about the notion that federal MPs, provincial MPPs represent the same boundaries, the same numbers of people?
Apples, mangoes, grapes. Totally different
Remember,
orders
that's a
of
different saying,
government.
but okay.
That's the first time I've heard an answer like that on this program. But
mangoes,
okay,
grapes.
I think I get it.
Totally different orders of government,
compare 'em.
totally different responsibilities, totally different relationship to the citizenry.
Okay, let's move on to a question of who runs this city. Because last week, the new Premier of Ontario appointed a fellow named Michael Lindsay, who's a former vice president at Infrastructure Ontario, which is this provincial organization responsible for building all the big stuff in the province. His job is to look at the feasibility of uploading the subways in Toronto to provincial control. That's about $2.5 billion worth of stuff, if I can put it that way. Again, starting with the councillor, what do we think of this idea?
Well, it's great the Premier wants to build more transit. We all do. But at the end of the day, we need the province to fund our service, our day-to-day operation. More than half of the people in Toronto take the bus for transit, and we need the nuts and bolts there. We need people to be running, the transit to be running seamlessly, people to get to work on time, get to school on time.
Does it matter who owns the subway?
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what it's called or who owns it. But as long as we are investing in the service, the day-to-day operations.
Okay, how about you?
Well, it does matter who owns it for a couple of reasons. One is the province has got different borrowing rules. And so the province can amortize. It's just like you buy a house, you don't pay for it in 2 years or 3 years, you pay for it over 25 years. Nobody could afford to buy one if you had to pay for it all at once. And one of the reasons why subway expansion is so expensive for the City of Toronto is because they're under more constrained rules than the province. And so if the province owns it, the province is in a position to borrow differently.
So you like this idea of uploading the subway?
Well, it's not that it's necessarily a good idea, but it certainly fixes one element of the problem of how do we pay for it. Whether it's good or not for the City of Toronto would have a lot to do with whether you can deal with a bunch of problems. One is how you make sure that you integrate the operations that the councillor was talking about with your capital and growth plan. And if you're going to be having, the surface stuff being operated by the city and the subway being operated by another entity, that isn't necessarily getting rid of overlap and duplication duplication in government delivery service. So I'm not thrilled by that. There's questions about if you own it below ground, do you own it above ground? Because nobody offers to pay for something unless you're also offering to get or expecting to get some of the revenue from it. The big opportunity with new subways is the development rights associated with the growth associated with it. That would ultimately, I suspect, be how one would pay for it. So there's a lot of questions that relate to the growth of the city that would be necessarily incidental to the growth of the subway.
Any indication the province has thought about any of these questions?
Oh, I think they're thinking about, but this is something that they are going to consult on. And ultimately, I want the two sides to get along and build transit. So what I'm hoping is that it'll be a fruitful discussion that'll figure out how we can remove barriers to transit, as opposed to being a fight about who gets to control which system.
Okay, well, at the moment, that's where we're at. And Stefan, let me ask you, just so everybody's clear about this, Toronto's transit system's got subways, it's got buses, it's got streetcars. This is only about the subways.
It is.
The province would upload ownership of the subways to itself, leaving the city responsible for the buses and streetcars. In principle, what do we think of this idea?
Well, a couple of key differences as well from the first point we were talking about with Bill 5, the council cuts. So this was in the PC platform, so this is not a surprise. And as John indicated, there is a process that's going to be followed to inform how it gets laid out. Okay, so subways, big ticket item. Uploading the responsibility of that could be beneficial. But if they take the revenue of that, we have a disaster. The subway part of the TTC is the golden egg, and it helps to subsidize the investment in other parts of our infrastructure system, above ground buses and others. So this is not a clean perforated edge on, we've got subways, and another curious question around the ongoing maintenance, which is in the order of magnitude of about $160 million a year. So are you taking the subways and the maintenance that goes with it and leaving the revenues with the city? Or are you taking all three? Because then Houston, we have a bit of a problem.
But if I'm reading between the lines properly, if the province uploads the subway and leaves Toronto to run the buses and the streetcars,
With what money?
with what money? That's the key.
Absolutely, with what money? Now, we know that cities already have an additional burden of infrastructure. So we own and operate 60% of public infrastructure and get 10 cents on the tax dollar. So there's a huge disconnect between what we are currently responsible for and what we have the funds to run them and build them with. This is an idea that's going to need to be studied, but a lot of question marks, and including the potential privatization of that service. So where we go with this, a lot of folks are going to be tracking and wanting to have a lot more answers clarified.
Michael, your view.
Yeah, I think everyone's basically covered it, but in the grand scheme of things, on a personal level, naturally, I would love to have the TTC privatized, because I always feel the private sector operates better than the public sector, but that's not a surprise that I would say that. The key here, though, is Michael Lindsay is looking at the feasibility, and that's what everyone sort of alluded to. Although idealistically, I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure John would agree, most small C conservatives would say, yeah, that naturally makes sense. Not everything can necessarily be managed by the private sector, and we know that. So I think really Mr. Lindsay's key here, or his task, is to see if, one, we can actually offload it or upload it to the province, and then B, what the next steps are. Because much like Mary said, and I agree with her, I don't care what it's called, I don't care what it's named. I would personally prefer the private sector to run it, but if it doesn't make sense, then either do it dually or find a way to somehow allow the private sector to name certain, little stations so that they can have a little bit of an input and let the province run it from there. But I think the real key here is that we want better subways in Toronto, and I think everyone believes in that. It's just where the end game or the end result comes.
So if you want better subways in Toronto, can you more likely get that if the province owns the subway system?
I believe it's possible, but again, they have to go through the studies, they have to crunch the numbers, and they have to figure it out. In answer to the question, are they looking at it? Of course they are, because they're not going to just fly blind, start the study without having at least thought about it a little bit. But whether all the machinations have been considered and every single number has been crunched, I doubt it. But over time, we'll see.
Mary, I wanted to get your view on, I don't know if you saw this op-ed piece in the paper the other day that Michael Warren wrote. He used to run the TTC about 30, 40 years ago. And he said basically we've got 12 regional transit authorities in the whole greater Toronto area. They're all competing for provincial funds. They're all making decisions that that may be in their interest, but may not be in the region's interest. And rather than something called Metrolinx, which makes regional decisions, he wanted something called Superlinx, which basically replaces all of these 12 authorities with one super organization that can make truly regional decisions. I hear some snickering, but what do you think?
I'm just saying the amalgamated city, but okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Bigger's not always better. We have difficulty with Metrolinx right now with, the public consultations, the approach, building sound walls and expanded system of the RER. And I would need to hear more about that, but I'm thinking no.
If all politics is local, is this a non-starter?
Well, from a political point of view, it might well be, but the observation about superlinks is, I remember an ADM at
Assistant Deputy Minister.
Assistant Deputy Minister at Transportation Ontario, who would have smiled at me and said, yeah, the superlinks, that would be the downtown central office of the Ministry of Transportation.
Sound like a mobster.
Well, yeah, but don't cross him. But at some point, the reason why transit was made local was because it was something that really needed that local touch and feel for service. I mean, you didn't necessarily want decisions about the Dovercourt subway being made by a Minister of Transportation from Thunder Bay sitting at Queen's Park, right? Or sorry, Dovercourt bus. I think the other thing, though, the other elephant that's slowly elbowing into the room is anybody who thinks about transit is starting to get nervous about what driverless vehicles is going to wind up doing to the economics of urban
That's
transit
another show,
systems.
John. We're not going there today. Sevan, let me. It doesn't matter who's the premier. It doesn't matter who's the mayor. There's always built-in tension in that relationship. Sometimes the relationship is better, sometimes it's worse. John Tory and Kathleen Wynne, most of the time, had a pretty good relationship with a couple of obvious exceptions. John Tory and Doug Ford do not have the warmest of relationships. How much is that going to affect all of the decisions that you think have to be made in the next 4 years?
Oh, well, look, relationships matter to anything, to any setting. And so absolutely, having leaders that can work collaboratively have been proven. That is one of the attributes. When you look at political leaders of any order of government who've been able to get the most things done, the ability to work collaboratively with their partners is a huge indication for success. There is a built-in tension, though, taking the personalities out of this entirely, between the dynamic of the city and the province. We are still the toddler in the family. We the city cannot get out of the toddler bed. And as mature as we are, and Toronto as an example, has the GDP of Alberta, of Quebec, of BC. We're not a bit player, but on the provincial stage we are. We make but a cameo. And we have watched routinely this dance between the province and the city keeps getting its toes stepped on. That is not personality. That is the fact that cities are the creatures of the province. And until we dig at that, until we literally look at what a new deal for cities in the 21st century looks like and feels like, not what it was created in 150 years ago, right? That until we do that, we are going to continue to have tension and tension grow. Wait until we're a 10 million person city in 2040. How is that going to feel?
Crowded.
It's going to feel crowded, yes. But it's also it's going to be another sign that a mega city cannot operate as a toddler in that family bed.
Some people will remember in 2007, when John Tory was leading the Ontario PC Party, he actually ran against Kathleen Wynne.
Correct.
In her riding.
That's
and
right.
she beat him. And yet they went on to have a very fruitful relationship, I think, a very collaborative relationship, again, with a couple of obvious exceptions. The current mayor finds himself now with a premier that he also ran against.
That's correct.
4 years ago. And I think by all accounts, it's not a great relationship. Is that problematic?
Yes and no. You're right. They ran against each other in 2014 in the Toronto mayoral election, and they would have run again this year if the Ontario PC Party hadn't briefly imploded for a little while. I agree with you. You're absolutely right that obviously there is, as you've pointed out, there is some tension there. There's no question. But they are professionals. They know they have to work together. They know they have to get things done, which means you have to put aside whatever grievances you've had in the past or what you still have in the present and ensure that your future is successful. Because obviously Doug Ford may be frustrated by what he saw in Toronto City Council, as he said, the 9-10 hours of discussion all the time, and everyone then would ultimately vote for something like a pothole along either political lines, which are informal, or party allegiances, which are also informal. I get that part of it. But they know they have to move forward. And to do that, they have to have an efficient relationship, they have to have a successful relationship, and all these little grievances have to be shoved off the table.
I want to, in our final segment here of our discussion, raise an issue that normally we talk about when it relates to Quebec and Canada. But instead, when the Toronto Star did break the story that Bill 5, the smaller Toronto City Council bill, was going to happen, the former chief planner of the City of Toronto, now a candidate for mayor, Jennifer Keesmaat, tweeted one word. Go ahead, Sheldon, bring this up. Secession. That's all she said when she found out. The next morning, which was a Friday, I think, just before registering to run for mayor, she tweeted something else. She said, now I've had a chance to sleep on it. Secession. Why should a city of 2.8 million not have self-governance? I think she slept on it a little bit more after that and ultimately took it back and said, maybe secession isn't such a great idea. But the original question she asks, a mature democracy of 2.8 million people being told essentially what it has to put on before it goes out to school is problematic for a lot of people. Is there something to the idea of secession in your view?
I don't believe that's a solution for Toronto.
It's not the way to go.
I really don't. Now, and secession as a concept for the City of Toronto precedes Twitter, right? So this has been around for decades, and it has been the default when the frustrations peak. And those frustrations around the list and the litany of things that the city needs to go to the province for permission for. And it just keeps getting longer and longer. You have to stop and wonder, if we're worried about efficiencies and how much government waste may be there, how much time both of those orders of government are spending on the inanity of giving permission to the city to do stuff that it really just ought to have
John
the
Tory
right to do.
compared it to, being in short pants going up to Queen's Park with hat in hand begging for dollars.
Begging for dollars. And that was in the example of the road tolls, which the City of Toronto Act in 2006 gave the city the right to have, but the fine print said, you need to check back with us before you do it. They checked back and the answer became no. But there's a list, Steve, of can we put traffic wardens on our street? Well, I need to ask permission for that. Can I ban door-to-door salespeople who want to sell you a new furnace? I need to ask the permission of the province.
The city
for
has
that.
to ask the province
It's
permission.
ridiculous, the list. So secession is often the fallback position of people that are so frustrated with the governance limitations that exist today.
Let me ask if one of them is sitting beside us. In your more frustrated moments, have you ever wanted to say, to hell with it, we want to be our own province?
I have been immensely frustrated over the last 8 years, but no. Is secession realistic? No. Do we walk away from conflict? Is that what we do when we're faced with confrontation like that? No, we stand and face it. And I think at the end of the day, the citizens of Toronto want to see all three levels of government work collaboratively together, but we need to do that with respect, with transparency, with open lines of communication, and for the greater good, and to actually get things done.
I'm going to assume, John, that you are not a secession fan, so I'm not even going to ask you that, right?
I would have been with Lincoln and Grant on that point in 1861 as well.
I get the reference, okay. In which case, because you've been there, you were chief of staff to the Minister of Municipal Affairs a couple decades ago, so you've seen this from the front lines. How do we create a better, more mature relationship between the city and the province so that, as Sevon describes it, you don't have to ask Daddy for permission to use the car keys every single night?
So, I think there's at least 70 pieces of provincial legislation that put dictates onto municipalities about what they have to do, right? And when you try and get rid of those, sometimes you wind up having a Walkerton. When, people say, oh, the municipal level's a mature level and, we can manage our own drinking water, and then the next thing you know, you're being denounced for having lowered standards of protection.
Okay, but hang on. Walkerton's a town of 5,000 people. We're talking about a city of 5 million.
Yeah, but we have a municipal act that, and you talked about how do we deal with it for cities, and so Toronto is a special case.
Yes.
But you can't deal with Toronto long without starting to talk about Ottawa and Hamilton and other places.
It's still not Walkerton.
It is, but when it comes to health and safety, then you can't start throwing everything overboard. And another piece of it is the whole red tape thing. And while I get it, that you may want to say, well, why can't we have our own bylaw about door-to-door sales? The Ministry of Consumer and Government Affairs, or whatever it's called this month, it does stuff like that, and we don't need to have local bylaws that 444 local bylaws that replicate provincial statutes. But what you can do is if you try and build a responsible relationship between the two levels of government, and if you do things like build on the memorandum of understanding that applies to all the other municipalities, and then the City of Toronto, Province of Ontario joint memorandum of understanding that tries to normalize the relationship, we could have further evolutions in that. And that was a thing that was originally created to say, listen, we won't be downloading on you anymore without having a consultation about it. We're not abandoning the right of the province to ultimately make a decision, but we're going to enshrine the concepts of consultation in it. And I think you can continually mature that relationship. But you've got to understand, though, with a pet peeve of the province is when you get an awful lot of local politicians saying, well, I will oppose something to be popular with my local ward, knowing full well that the province will wind up having to implement it, impose it, and carry the political can for it. And this is where the last segment kind of links back in with your first. The greatest provincial frustration about municipalities is that they're not more like a province. That when the province speaks, it mostly speaks with one voice, whereas a city council speaks with as many voices as there are. And to some degree, I think, if there was a real reason behind what the province was trying to do, it was to try and have there be, at the governance level, a more orderly voice coming out of the City of Toronto, a more orderly, high-level, almost like cabinet-like.
But you told us 15 minutes ago it wasn't built to do that.
Exactly. And the problem is it's caught between the two things. And so it's not so much that it's a toddler, it's more like it's a 17-year-old daughter. That deserves a fair. I just have experience with the one.
I'm not defending it.
It's somebody that deserves a fair bit of autonomy, but you sometimes get exhausted trying to manage the relationship.
Do you have a 17-year-old daughter?
I deny that. Yes, I do. And like the real important point about the relationship is, frankly, how nuanced and how significant it is. And so the personal relationships matter, like what Siobhan was saying, and the institutional relationships and the relationships between senior management and the Ontario Public Service really matters too. I mean, fundamentally, we all need this stuff to work. Every time you make a heavy-handed decision, you use up a little bit of your political capital.
Right.
What you need to do is do that as little as possible, and then try and build the bridges that allow you to have the more productive relationship.
I don't want to get too like it was always better in the old days about this. But the fact of the matter is, when Bill Davis was... Well, it might have been, that's right. When Bill Davis was at Queen's Park and Paul Godfrey was at City Hall.
Sure.
The fact is they were both in the same party, and overwhelmingly they got stuff done. And every now and then, yes, there was a little spasm, but in the main, that relationship worked pretty well.
Yes.
And I don't know if it was because of those two personalities happened to work well, or because things just worked better back then. I don't know. Can we do that today?
Well, much like talking about driverless vehicles, it's a different issue. Politics has changed, and the dynamic is very different. It's not just the United States where you see this, it's happening here as well. And look, I agree with Siobhan completely when she says that there are certain things Toronto should do which should just be automatic. We shouldn't have to go begging cap in hand to say, please, please, let us do it. I agree, because that's inefficient to actually go away from what I've been sort of saying this whole time. But at the same time, to use your example, look, politicians are not always necessarily going to be of the same party or orientation. And that's just not going to happen all the time. So you have to have the give and take, much like we were talking about with John Tory and Kathleen Wynne, for example. And secondly, while it's nice for people like Jennifer Keesmaat to come out and talk about secession, which I find to be, and you can quote me on this, absolutely foolish. Something that we should not be talking about in this election. We have far more important things to discuss than something written on a piece of paper which will never be put through. It will never happen. It just won't. Because there are lots of large cities, including in the United States, where they talk about succession. Do you want to have Northern California being discussed over and over again? It gets ridiculous after a while. But this is why we have, I think, at least this election, we have a mayor who's not perfect by any means, and I've had lots of issues with John Tory over his life, although I like the man personally and I get along with him quite well. He's just too much of a left-leaning Tory for me. But he is a much better, much wiser, and more focused individual than Jennifer Keesmaat is, irrespective of this massive city planning that she's done, and all the comments that she made that John Tory was running the city efficiently, and now all of a sudden he's not. You're allowed to change your opinions, but in the grand scheme of things, the two sides have to work together somehow. And in the end, they ultimately do, aside from the personalities, the politics, and all the other intangibles.
And again, just for the record, while she tweeted secession on day one, she pulled it back.
Yeah, she pulled it back after a sleepless night or two or three. she never needed to say it in the first place.
Yeah.
And that has to be something people consider, I think anyway, in the ballot box. Do you really want someone who's just going to throw something out? Is that the sort of person you want leading the city of Toronto? But again, that's up to people to decide.
We'll leave that. Yeah, we'll leave that for another program. But when she did tweet that, you know, she clearly was speaking. There is a constituency in the city of Toronto that would, certainly now that Doug Ford is the premier, and they are perhaps more on the left side of the political spectrum, they don't want to have anything to do with him anymore. What do those people do? You can't secede. Michael's right. It's not going to happen.
And it's been talked about before. I remember coming up in the first term about Toronto becoming its own province type thing that's been debated many times. Not formally, but you know, over coffee and tossed around at council. But basically, we have this premier for 4 years, and some of us worked with him at City Hall. And I just think we need to find ways to work together. I mean, lobbing this grenade at us out of the blue, it is not a good first step. It doesn't bode well for a decent relationship, but
and for the record, you're not running again anyway, right?
Right. It doesn't affect me
Exactly.
as a politician. It affects me as a Torontonian and a city builder. And I disagree with it, and also the manner it was done. But nevertheless, we have this premier for 4 years, so it behooves us to work together.
Let me give the last 30 to Sevon here. Regardless if it's a 47-seat city council or a 25-seat city council, you know, the judge is, I guess, going to make some determination on that soon. How hopeful are you that Queen's Park and City Hall can actually work better after the election is over?
I'm very hopeful. There is not a leader in any order of government in this province that doesn't want our province to thrive. That's why so many people seek elected office, right? To be able to improve the odds for many. So I am absolutely hopeful, but I think it is going to take a push around a deeper sense of collaboration and consultation. You know, democracy is not a monologue. We should not see decisions given to cities, especially cities like Toronto, that punch well above their weight for the contribution to this province. One of the things that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did in his very early days as Prime Minister was he called all of the big city mayors to Ottawa and sat down and met with them. He didn't need to do that. His predecessor hadn't. And in fact, in the pecking order, the hierarchy of government,
Feds have nothing to do with
have
cities.
nothing to do with
yeah,
cities.
Constitutionally.
But what a great symbol that was for the dialogue that would exist between the leaders on the front lines of our urban cities, 86% of Canadians live in them, and the very leader at the top, our Prime Minister. That's the kind of representation and consultation I hope we see at Queen's Park as well.
Speaking of dialogue, ours is done. I want to thank our 4 guests for coming into TVO tonight. Mary Margaret McMahon, the Toronto City Councillor, John Matheson from Strategy Corp, Sevon Pelvetzian from Civic Action, Michael Taube from Troy Media and the Washington Times. Great to have you all in TVO tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.